rain pounded on the tin roof like angry tears from the heavens. Emily Carter pressed both hands against her round belly, feeling the baby stir restlessly inside, as if it too sensed the storm approaching. The door creaked open without a knock. Mrs. Briggs stepped in, her hand trembling as she held a faded yellow sheet of paper. "Bad news, sweetheart." Emily's heart dropped to her feet. At just 23, she had already learned that bad news always came with a pitying gaze disguised as concern. Mrs. Doris had never liked her. Her disdain only deepened once Emily's belly became impossible to ignore. "You need to leave. Today." The words echoed through the small room like gunshots. Emily rose slowly, trailing her hand along the peeling wall for balance. 7 months pregnant, every movement felt like climbing a mountain. "But I paid last week's rent." Mrs. Briggs shook her head, avoiding her desperate eyes. Someone complained. "Said babies cry, you're better off finding somewhere else." "But the baby's not even born yet." "It will be. And when it is, it will cry. I can't take that risk." The world spun. Emily collapsed onto the edge of the narrow bed, the only piece of furniture in the room she'd called home for the past 8 months. This place had been her refuge after she found out she was pregnant, after the baby's father vanished like smoke, leaving behind empty promises and a broken heart. "Please, I have nowhere else to go." "I'm sorry, honey, the decision's been made." The older woman placed the eviction notice on the table and left, slamming the door behind her like she was closing off the entire world. Emily stood frozen, staring at the paper, its words blurring as tears streamed down her face. 23, pregnant, alone. Those words kept repeating in her mind like hammers pounding her chest. She had never known her father. Her mother had passed when she was just 16. The aunt who raised her had moved away after a fight about the pregnancy. "I responsible," Aunt Rose had screamed, "throwing your life away for some worthless boy." Now sitting in this damp little room, with rain pounding the window and the baby kicking her ribs, Emily began to wonder if Aunt Rose had been right. Maybe she really had lost everything. Maybe she really was irresponsible. But then her hand brushed her belly and felt the tiny life shift inside, and something fierce ignited in her chest. No, she wasn't irresponsible. She was a mother. And mothers fight. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and began packing the few things she owned. 2 changes of clothes, a faded blanket, a pair of worn-down slippers, and a red lipstick. A gift from her ex in those early days of romance, when she still believed in proposals and happy endings. She stuffed it all into a crinkled grocery bag that rustled with every step. Pitiful. But it was all she had. Her entire life now fit into a single plastic bag. She walked down the creaking steps of the boarding house for the last time, each footfall a bitter farewell. Outside, the rain had eased slightly, but the sky remained heavy with thick gray clouds, mirroring the weight in her chest. Emily wandered the narrow streets of the small Montana town with no destination in mind. One hand clutched the flimsy bag that held her life, while the other wrapped protectively around her pregnant belly. The cold bled through her thin jacket. She sat on a damp bench beneath the overhang of a convenience store, arms wrapped around her belly, head bowed low. She didn't cry. She had cried herself empty the night before, staring at the bare walls of the room she had called home for 8 months. But now, with rain slicing the air and silence pressing on her chest, even breathing felt like defeat. People passed. Some glanced, most didn't. To them, she was just another cautionary tale, a girl who didn't think things through, now paying the price. If only they knew that she had trained to be a baker, dreamed of owning a tiny shop with yellow curtains and the smell of cinnamon, that she'd worked long shifts to save up, that each night she placed her hand on her belly and whispered, "I'll give you everything I have, baby. I promise." The baby stirred. A small kick. A reminder it was still there, waiting, relying on her. But how could she move forward with nothing? No shelter, no job, no one. Her heart felt like a crumbled house, with only a fragile roof left to shield the tiny soul growing inside. Emily looked up at the overcast sky, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, if someone's out there, just help me. I don't need a miracle, just a place, somewhere to start again." The rain hadn't stopped when Emily opened her eyes again. She didn't know how long she'd been sitting there. Her fingers were stiff from the cold, her back soaked against the bench. The baby stirred inside her, as if asking, "Where do we go from here?" "Excuse me, miss, are you all right?" The voice was warm, deep, calm, unthreatening. Emily looked up, startled. An older man stood in front of her, late 60s or early 70s, with a worn-out cowboy hat, sun-weathered skin, and eyes that had seen more than they ever spoke. "Don't be scared," he said, lifting both hands in a gentle gesture. "I'm not here to bother you. You just look like someone who could use a hand." Emily didn't answer right away. She'd grown used to people looking away, not reaching out. But this man's gaze was different. There was no pity in it, just plain, quiet kindness. "My name's Walter," he said, easing down onto the far end of the bench, careful to keep his distance. "I'm a ranch hand and driver out at Crescent Valley, about a couple hours from here. Not a fancy place, but it's got a roof, hot meals, and we're looking for someone to help in the kitchen. If you need a place..." Emily clutched her bag tighter. She didn't know him. She didn't know where Crescent Valley was. But the cold in her bones and the ache in her heart, those were familiar. Too familiar. "Feeling? Why me?" she asked softly. Walter gave a quiet smile. "Because I once had a daughter, and I wasn't there for her when she needed me. So now, when I see someone drowning, I can't just walk by." Emily turned her face away as tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Not because he pitied her, because he understood. Without asking, without pressing, he understood. "The ranch is owned by a man named Jack Holloway," Walter continued. "He doesn't talk much, but he's good. Gave up everything once to start over. Something tells me you two might understand each other." Another gust of wind blew through the street, sending damp hair across Emily's face. She shivered. The baby kicked again, as if nudging her forward. Does the ranch have a private room?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Walter nodded. "There's a spare room right next to the kitchen. Not too far, but quiet. Safe." Emily took a slow, shaky breath. She looked out into the rain, then down at the small bag at her feet. This wasn't perfect, but nothing was, and she had no other choice. "I'll go," she said, her voice trembling, not from fear, but from something dangerously close to hope. Walter stood, offering his hand. "My truck's just around the corner. You can rest on the ride if you'd like." She placed her hand in his, weathered, warm, real. For the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. The red dirt road stretched ahead like a scar running straight to the horizon. Every jolt of the pickup truck made Emily clutch the door handle tighter. The baby inside her stirred with every bump, kicking anxiously, as if it too could sense the unknown future waiting at the end of the road. Walter drove in silence, occasionally glancing at the rearview mirror with worried eyes. "Is it much farther?" Emily asked, her voice softer than she meant it to be. "Almost there. See that wooden fence up ahead? That's the edge of Mr. Holloway's land." Emily craned her neck and saw a vast ranch spreading far beyond what the eye could take in. Lush green fields dotted with grazing cattle, tall trees swaying gently in the evening breeze, and, in the distance, a low white house nestled in the quiet landscape, as if it belonged there forever. "It's bigger than I imagined." Mr. Holloway left the city 3 years ago, bought this place and never looked back. Says it gives him the peace he spent his whole life searching for. There was something in Walter's tone that made Emily curious. Emily rolled down the window a few inches. The breeze carried the scent of hay, pine, and smoke, something between peace and loneliness. Her chest tightened as fields stretched endlessly before her. She didn't know where she was going, but strangely, the fear inside her wasn't as loud as before. "We're almost there," Walter said, nodding toward a distant white fence. "That's the ranch boundary. House is 10 minutes from here." She nodded, her hand instinctively covering her belly as the baby kicked lightly, as if it too was listening. She leaned her cheek against the window, letting the cold glass anchor her to the moment. Thoughts buzzed in her mind. What kind of man was Jack? Would he be cold? Stern? Would he take one look at her swollen belly and send her away? As they pulled into the ranch yard, Emily spotted the main house, a single-story wooden structure, painted white, with a long front porch and a creaking rocking chair. A large dog napped lazily near the steps, undisturbed by the sound of tires on gravel. Walter cut the engine and looked at her. "Chin up. You're not here to beg. You're here to begin again." Emily took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped into the wind. The air was sharper here, cleaner. It wrapped around her like a whispered welcome. After a few knocks, the front door creaked open. A tall man stood in the doorway, broad shoulders, strong hands, still wearing work gloves. He smelled of earth and cedar smoke. His eyes, deep brown like old timber, settled on Emily. He didn't scan or judge, he simply saw her. "You must be Emily," he said, voice low and measured. "Yes," she replied, barely more than a breath. "Walter said you needed help in the kitchen." Jack nodded, wiping his hands on a cloth at his hip. "He also said you needed somewhere safe." The words struck something deep in her chest, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. No labels, no pity, just fact, quietly acknowledged. "You're welcome to stay if you choose," he continued. "Rooms next to the kitchen, shared bath. Food's simple, work's easy, just cooking for me and Walter." Emily nodded, eyes lowered. "I'll do my best." "Just do it real," Jack said, and stepped aside to let her in. Walter showed her to the room, a modest space with a single bed, a faded quilt, and a window that looked out toward the barns. "Thank you. I promise I won't let you down." A faint smile touched his lips, softening the otherwise serious lines of his face. "I rarely regret my decisions." They looked at each other in silence, a moment stretched so long it felt suspended in time. Emily sensed he was studying her, not critically, but as if trying to complete a puzzle with a missing piece. There was something strangely familiar in his eyes, a quiet sadness she recognized because she saw it in her own reflection every day. "How far along are you?" he asked, surprising her with the natural ease of the question. 7 months. It's my first." Jack gave a small nod, as if committing that to memory. "Then you'll need special care. If anything feels off, let me know immediately. The nearest hospital's about 40 minutes from here." The genuine concern in his voice caught Emily off guard. She blinked rapidly to hold back the tears threatening to fall. "I'll be careful." When he left her alone, Emily sat at the edge of the bed, placed her hand over her belly, and whispered, "Maybe this place will be different." The early morning wind in Crescent Valley carried a dry chill only the highlands knew. Emily rose with the dawn, splashing cold well water on her face, lighting the stove and frying eggs for Walter and Jack. It had only been a few days, but something inside her had begun to settle, like the first quiet roots of a routine. Jack remained the same, quiet, precise. He rose before the sun, heading out before the light touched the ridgeline, often returning only when shadows began to stretch long. But sometimes, when Emily caught glimpses of him from the porch, pausing to sip water or adjust the saddle, she saw something familiar in his eyes, the same hollowness she saw in her own reflection. That morning, Walter had gone into town for supplies. Emily stayed behind, alone. She was spreading butter on toast when she heard it. The sudden pounding of hooves, then a strange sound, heavy, urgent, and then nothing. Her heart jumped. She rushed out the back door, squinting across the distant field. Horses galloped in confusion, their movements sharp and wild. In the open space, she spotted him, Jack, lying motionless in the mud beside his gray mare. She didn't think. She ran. The ground was soaked, pulling at her boots with every step. Wind sliced through her coat. Her belly weighed her down like an anchor, but she pushed forward, her breath ragged, the baby kicking as if echoing her own fear. "Jack!" she cried, her voice trembling. "Jack, can you hear me?" She reached him, dropped to her knees in the mud, not caring about her clothes or the biting cold. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, his shirt torn. He was breathing, but barely. "Jack, wake up," she whispered, her hands cupping his face, warm, damp, too human to ignore. "You can't scare me like this." The baby inside her kicked violently, as if terrified by its mother's fear. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, not caring about the mud or her dress. There was blood on his forehead, slowly trickling down. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell. He was still breathing. He was still alive. "Please, wake up. Don't leave me here. Not now." The words spilled out before she could stop them. Why did she care this much? She had only known him for less than 2 days. But there was something between them, a thin, unnamed thread that had existed from the very first moment. Jack groaned softly. His brown eyes slowly fluttered open, squinting against the early morning light. A faint, broken smile flickered across his lips. "Guardian angel," he whispered, voice hoarse. "I'm no angel. You're hurt. We need to call someone." She started to get up, but his hand unexpectedly gripped her wrist, tighter than she expected. "Don't go. Stay, just a little while." There was something so fragile in that request. It made her chest ache. She sat back down, gently cradling his head in her lap, her eyes lifted toward the blazing orange sky above. The sun was rising, painting hope across a morning filled with pain. "What happened?" "Horses spooked, snake. I was thrown, hit my head on a rock maybe. You need to go to the hospital." "I'll be fine, just a few stitches." "Jack, please, don't try to be a hero. Let me help you back to the house. Walter should be back soon. He'll know what to do." He tried to smile, though sweat beaded on his forehead from the pain. She looked at him, brow furrowed. Even injured, he tried to keep everything under control, just like she always had. "Fine, but if you pass out again, I'm driving us to the hospital myself." He let out a small laugh, and the sound of it made her chest tighten. "You don't know how to drive a pickup. Then do as I say." She helped him to his feet, his arm around her shoulders, the weight of his body making her feel both small and strangely protected. They walked slowly back toward the house. Her breathing labored not just from the effort, but from the dangerous closeness between them. In the kitchen, she eased him into a chair and rushed to get a clean towel and water. When she returned, he was watching her, his gaze so deep it made her blush. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "You what?" "Run out to me, kneel in the mud. Help me up." She froze, holding the damp cloth mid-air. Anyone would have done the same. Not everyone would. That sentence, it sounded like gratitude, like someone who had once fallen, and no one came. She stepped closer, gently wiping the blood from his forehead, trying to ignore the strange electricity between them. "Why didn't anyone help you when you fell?" she asked softly. Jack was quiet for a long time, eyes drifting to the window as if staring through old memories. "Back in the city, I fell, more than once. No one ever stopped." The words cut into Emily's heart like a blade. She paused, eyes searching his. She recognized that look. It was the look of someone who had sunk, and no one reached down to pull him back up. "I know what that feels like," she whispered, "to fall and have no one reach for your hand." Jack looked at her for a long time, and for the first time, something in his eyes softened. 3 days after the accident, Jack still had a bandage across his forehead, but he continued working as if nothing had happened. The wind shifted early that morning. The sky looked like a thick wool blanket, low and heavy. Emily was peeling apples in the kitchen when she glanced out the window. Snow was falling, thick and white, dancing on the cold air. Walter stepped in, brushing flakes from his coat and shaking his head. "This isn't good," he muttered. "They're calling for a full-blown blizzard, strongest yet this season." Emily set down the knife. She didn't know much about snowstorms, but something deep in her chest, a mother's instinct maybe, tightened sharply. The baby began to move more than usual. And then suddenly, A strange, seizing pressure gripped her spine. Get strong kicks, she told herself. But then came another, and another, closer, sharper. Walter noticed her pale face. "Emily, are you all right?" "I think, no," she gasped, grabbing the edge of the table. "I think she's coming." "About you're not due for 2 more months." "I know." The front door slammed open. Jack appeared, wind-chapped and covered in snow. He froze when he saw her doubled over, hands clutched around her belly. "It's happening," Walter said quickly, "and we can't get her to a hospital. Roads are iced over. We'd be stuck in the forest." Jack didn't speak. He tightened his jaw, set down his gear, and went straight to Emily. "You're not alone. We're not letting you do this by yourself." Emily shook her head, sweat already gathering at her temples. "I can't have her here. I'm not strong enough." Jack leaned closer, eyes locking with hers. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. We've got this. Together." Walter rushed off for hot water and clean towels. Jack helped Emily into the bedroom as wind howled through the cracks and snow hammered the roof like fate knocking on the door. The contractions came fast and unforgiving. Emily screamed, clawing at the bedsheets. Every time she felt like giving up, Jack gripped her hand tighter, his touch pulling her back from the edge. "I'm here," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "No one's going anywhere." "I'm scared." "So am I, but you're not alone." One final scream, then silence, a moment of stillness in the storm. Then it came, the raw, perfect cry of new life. Walter beamed, holding the tiny, wriggling form in trembling hands. "A girl! And she's strong." Emily sobbed with relief. Jack brought the baby close and laid her on Emily's chest. She was tiny, her skin flushed pink, her breath loud and alive, like the blizzard itself had given her its power. "Hello, Sophie," Emily whispered. "You came early, but I've waited my whole life for you." Jack looked at them, mother and child, and something caught in his throat. His eyes burned, and in their reflection, he saw something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. 3 weeks after Sophie's birth, winter still blanketed Crescent Valley, but inside the little wooden house, a new warmth had quietly settled. Rising from the soft cries of a newborn, the scent of warm milk in the air, and glances that no longer looked away. Jack had changed, not in words but in ways that mattered. He learned to change diapers, to hold Sophie like he'd been doing it forever. Some mornings, Emily would wake to find him in the rocking chair, baby in arms, humming a tune with no name. "I never thought I could love something that fits in the palm of my hand," Jack confessed one night by the fire. Emily watched him, heart quietly stirring. There was something in the way he looked at Sophie, tender, reverent, that told her this wasn't a passing kindness. This was love, real, unspoken, growing. One morning, sunlight spilled through the frosted windows. Emily was making a bottle when Jack walked into the kitchen, his hair tousled, feet bare, eyes still bright. She turned, ready to tease him about his hair, but their eyes met, and the space between them vanished. He moved toward her, slowly, as if asking with each step. She didn't step back, not because she was ready, but because her heart, long fractured, was finally unlocking. Their first kiss was gentle, trembling, hesitant, like a promise whispered, not spoken. One morning, while she was nursing Sophie and Jack was preparing breakfast, he suddenly turned to her. "Emily, can I ask you something?" "What is it?" She smiled, gently patting the baby's back. "Why are you still here? Why do you trust me?" "I have a past. I've failed. I've been betrayed. And I know you deserve so much more than this." She looked up slowly, her voice steady. "Because you were the first person who didn't walk away when I fell apart." He stood still for a long moment, then stepped closer and gently cupped her cheek. "And you're the first person who's made me want to live again." Silence fell between them, eyes locked, the weight of all the unspoken words suspended in an endless moment. Jack, she whispered, you know, I never dared to dream of this, of a home, of a man holding my daughter without being told, of a future. Then start dreaming, he said with a quiet smile, one arm circling her neck, the other hand resting gently on the baby's back. Because I already have, every day, about you, about her, about us. Emily closed her eyes as tears rolled down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, she wasn't crying out of fear or grief or loneliness. She cried because she knew she wasn't alone anymore. But love, no matter how true, always walks with fear. And Emily's past was never far behind. 2 days later, while Walter shoveled snow from the porch, a strange car pulled up. A woman stepped out, blonde curls, expensive coat, sharp eyes. Jack appeared on the porch. His face froze for a heartbeat. Clara, he said quietly. Emily watched through the window, her chest tightening. Clara, Jack's ex-wife. The woman who left him when they lost their child. The one Walter once said had disappeared without looking back, now stood at his door again. They spoke outside. Emily couldn't hear, only saw Jack's expression darken and Clara's lips curl in a cool smile as she handed him a folder. After a few minutes, she walked back to her car without turning. When Jack came in, Emily stood by Sophie's crib, eyes not meeting his. What did she want? She asked softly. Money, he said honestly. She needs help. And you'll help her. Jack paused. I can't turn away from someone I once shared a life with. Emily nodded. I don't have a past worth revisiting. She turned away, her heart churning. In Clara, she saw everything she wasn't. Poised, polished, claimed. And who was she? A nobody. A girl with no ring, no name, living in the spare room of a man who made no promises. At night, when Jack knocked gently on her door, Emily didn't answer. She was afraid, not of him, but of what it meant to believe she might deserve this. The second storm of winter came faster than the forecasts warned. The wind screamed from the mountains like a wild animal, and snow fell so thick it swallowed every trail whole. In the small room beside the kitchen, Emily sat by Sophie's crib, softly humming her to sleep. It had been 3 days since Clara's visit, and Emily had kept her distance from Jack. Silence was the only armor she knew. That night, Walter stayed in the barn to watch over the horses. Jack was out behind the house, fixing a frozen pipe. Emily felt something strange stir low in her abdomen, like a wave rolling in from somewhere deep. As she rose from the chair, a warm rush spilled down her legs. Blood. She didn't scream, she didn't panic. She gripped the table's edge, whispering, "It's nothing, probably normal postpartum." Like a spell, she repeated it again, but the blood didn't stop. It soaked through her nightgown, trailing down her legs, dark and thick against pale skin. Her hands started to tremble. The air suddenly felt too thin. Sophie still slept peacefully, unaware that her mother's life was slowly bleeding out beside her. Emily took a shaky step toward the couch, but when her fingers brushed the armrest, her knees buckled. She collapsed. She didn't know how long had passed when the door slammed open. Jack stepped in, snow still clinging to his coat. He called her name twice before he noticed the blood. Then his world narrowed to a single point. She's dying. Emily, he dropped to the floor, hands on her cheeks. Cold, too cold. He didn't scream, didn't cry. He just moved. He lifted her in one arm, scooped Sophie with the other, and ran to the truck like a man possessed, tearing through the storm with nothing but headlights and desperation. In the truck, Emily's breathing was shallow. Her eyelids fluttered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" Jack asked, knuckles white on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the blinding snow. "For being afraid, for not trusting whatever this is between us." He glanced at her, voice breaking. "I was afraid too. I lost everything once, but when I saw you holding Sophie, I knew. I don't want to be alone anymore." Silence sat between them, soft and full. Emily turned to him, a tear slipping down her cheek even as she smiled. "If I don't make it, promise me you'll raise her as your own." Jack's grip tightened. "Don't talk like you're leaving. I'm not losing you, not again." And through the storm, over the groaning engine and frozen road, a promise was made. If she lived, everything would change, and love would no longer be something they ran from, but something they chose. Emily woke in a hospital room bathed in soft white light. A gentle hum from the heart monitor pulsed near her ear, and the sterile scent of survival hung in the air. Her chest rose slowly, and the moment her eyes opened, she saw Jack. He sat slumped in a stiff plastic chair beside her bed, head resting on his arm, one hand still holding hers. "Jack," she whispered, voice barely audible. He jerked awake, blinking, eyes red-rimmed with sleeplessness. The moment he saw her awake, he didn't speak right away. His head dropped, his lips trembled. He wanted to say 1,000 things, but only managed one. "You came back?" She nodded, squeezing his hand gently. The doctors told her how close she'd come to dying. Another few minutes, and she might not have made it. Jack had saved her life. She stayed in the hospital for almost a week. Jack never left. Walter came to care for Sophie, taking shifts so Jack could nap for a few hours. It was odd, but warm, like a family forming, quietly. On discharge day, Jack pushed her wheelchair to the truck. Sophie lay nestled in her arms, wrapped in a soft, cream-colored blanket Walter had knitted by hand. The baby slept soundly, cheeks flushed pink with peace. They didn't talk much on the ride home, but the silence wasn't cold anymore. It was space. Space to breathe, to think, to realize they'd made it through the darkest part. When the truck rolled up to the familiar white cabin, Emily looked at it with new eyes. It wasn't just shelter anymore. It was home. Jack carried Sophie, helped Emily from the truck. Inside, the house smelled faintly of warm bread. Walter had left a fresh loaf on the table. She stepped into her room slowly. Once just a safe place. Now, it was her sanctuary. That morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting golden stripes that danced across baby Sophie's peaceful face. The tiny, miraculous girl who had arrived 2 months early, yet strong like the woman who had brought her into the world in the middle of a storm. Emily had whispered the name Sophie from the moment she was born, as if it were a prayer, a sacred marker of a brand new beginning. Year passed in a breath. And then, on the 20th of the month, the day Jack called the day we became a family, Emily baked a small, simple cake. No filling, just flour, warmth, and love. Sophie cooed happily in the crib Jack had built beside the kitchen, swatting at dangling toys while Emily whisked eggs, laughing at her daughter's bubbly giggles. "Sophie, where's Daddy?" she asked, glancing toward the door. The baby immediately turned her head toward the porch and broke into a wide, toothless grin. Jack had left early, saying he was heading to town to handle some ranch paperwork, but Emily had noticed something different about him lately. Distracted eyes, the way he bit his lip every time she brought up the future. Then came the familiar sound of the pickup engine. Emily wiped her hands on her apron and smoothed her hair, her heart fluttering. Even after nearly a year of living together, her pulse still danced every time Jack came home. He stepped into the kitchen, holding a long box wrapped in brown paper. "Hello to my 2 favorite girls," he said cheerfully, lifting Sophie high into the air, making her giggle uncontrollably. Emily smiled softly, though her eyes lingered on the suspicious package. "What's that?" "Hold on, first, there's something I need to say." His tone was serious enough to make her frown slightly. "Good news or bad?" "Depends on you." Jack placed Sophie gently back into the crib and turned to take Emily's hand. "Remember how I said I was going to town to handle ranch paperwork?" It wasn't for the ranch. Her heart skipped. It was for adoption papers. Emily froze. "What did you say?" "I filed to legally become Sophie's father." Emotions surged through her like a tidal wave. She opened her mouth, but words refused to come. I don't want to just be her dad at heart. I want my name on her birth certificate. I want her to carry my last name. And if you'll let me..." Jack swallowed and opened the box. Inside was a navy ghoul velvet ring box, and within it, a ring that shimmered like a promise made under stars. "Emily Carter, I don't just want to share this roof or raise Sophie beside you. I want to call you my wife. I want to call Sophie my daughter. I want to build forever with you, not just live through it." Emily burst into tears. Not the quiet kind, the kind you can't hold back. Tears of shock, of joy, of all the things she thought she'd never get to have. Are you sure?" she whispered. "You know I have nothing but this baby and a heart full of cracks." Jack cupped her cheek gently, his eyes glowing. "You and Sophie are everything. More than I ever dreamed. You brought me back to life. She taught me what it means to love without blood." He took a deep breath. "You are my home." Emily looked at the man who had collapsed in the mud, who had held her hand through labor, now kneeling in the kitchen, holding a tiny ring that sparkled like the whole sky. "Yes, I say yes." Jack laughed and wrapped her in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while Sophie clapped her little hands and squealed as if she knew exactly what had just happened. The ring fit perfectly. "How did you know the size?" she gasped. "Walter measured while you were napping," he grinned. "You two conspired? For the greatest conspiracy of all, our happiness." He pulled her into a kiss, deep and gentle, fiery and soft. A kiss that said every pain, every loss had been worth it for this moment. When they pulled apart, Sophie gripped the edge of her crib and stood, for the very first time, as if to bless the moment, as if to celebrate. Jack jumped up, grabbing the old camera from the cupboard. Sophie's first stand, and our first frame as a real family. They took dozens of photos, Jack holding Sophie proudly, Emily raising her hand to show off the ring, all three of them smiling like they'd just uncovered the secret of joy. That evening, they sat on the porch, watching a sunset as red as wine. Sophie slept across Emily's lap, one tiny hand curled around Jack's finger. They neutralized everything they could because, unlike them, there was no... "I've got an idea," Jack said. "Let's get married right here on the ranch. Just us, Sophie, and Walter. Nothing fancy." "That's more than perfect," Emily whispered. "No aisle, no altar. Just you, me, and the life we've built. I've also been thinking, maybe we should build another room, just in case Sophie gets a little brother or sister." Emily turned to him, eyes filling again. "You want more children with me? As many as you'll give me, as long as they're with you." And in that moment, her heart burst open to the quiet music of a dream finally come true. The following spring, as snow melted into gentle streams weaving through the grass, they held a small wedding in the heart of Crescent Valley. No grand gowns, no chapel, no bells. Just green fields, soft winds, wildflowers in bloom, and a wooden table beneath an old pine tree. Emily wore a simple white dress, her hand clasped tightly in Jack's. Walter stood proudly as their witness. Sophie, now nearly a year old, waddled through the meadow in tiny yellow shoes, her hair catching the breeze like a little angel lost in a perfect moment. No vows were shouted. Their love had never needed loud promises, only quiet days shared, storms weathered hand in hand, and silences that always felt full. Emily was pregnant again. Another beginning, this time without fear. As the golden afternoon light spilled across the hills and Sophie's laughter echoed in the valley, Emily glanced at Jack, catching that same tender look he gave her the first time they met. They didn't need a perfect ending, because for them this wasn't an ending at all. It was only the beginning, and this time they would write every chapter together.